Hi everyone, welcome to part 1 of our Gender, Sport, and Injury lecture. Today we will be covering 3 main objectives, but only one objective for part 1, being to understand the difference between sex, gender, and sexuality, and its relative application to athletes in sport. It's important to highlight and understand the difference in these terms to then better understand the relationship between gender, sex, and sport or sports injury. As a reminder, please open your ticket-in worksheet to follow along with this and subsequent videos. Feel free to pause the video to answer the associated questions. So what is the difference between sex and gender? And what about sexuality? First, let's start with sex. Sex is an individual's biological traits that society associates with being male or female. Intersex, however, refers to an individual with mixed chromosomes, internal reproductive organs, and/or genitalia. Gender, however, is referred to as cultural meanings attached to being masculine and feminine, which influence personal identities. A transgender individual, for example, was born with biological markers as one sex, but their gender identity is not necessarily congruent. Being transgender does not imply any specific sexual orientation. This is important to note. So a trans individual may additionally identify as straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc. Queer is an umbrella term for individuals who do not necessarily identify with one gender or one sexual orientation, and usually embrace a fluidity of these identities. Another example of specific gender is someone who is cisgender. Cisgender refers to someone who identifies as a gender that does align with birth sex. Moving on to sexuality. Sexuality refers to a sexual or romantic attraction, practices, and identity. Gender identity and sexuality are separate, distinct parts of overall identity. So again, it's important to recognize that sexuality and gender are not necessarily tied together. Someone who is heterosexual is an individual who is straight, or sexually or romantically attracted to someone of the opposite sex. And moving on to gender expression. So gender expression is the ways in which individuals externally communicate gender identity to others through behavior, clothing, haircut, voice, names, pronouns, and other forms of presentation, and these are based on societal norms. So, for example, males or someone who identifies as a male for their gender may dress with with pants and may have short hair based on societal norms, whereas females might wear skirts, makeup, etc. Obviously, we know that not everyone identifies with these norms, and certainly people break or challenge these norms based on gender. So let's see how well we're able to recall these identities. Follow along on your worksheet picture of your genderbread man. So let's start with number 1. Number 1 represents how a person feels inside regarding their identity. Number 2 represents how someone might show others a gender they identify as. Number 3 represents biological markers of an individual. And number 4 represents someone's attraction to another individual. In the boxes to the right of the genderbread person, write the identity term and a brief description of that term in your own words. Pause the video if you need so you can have time to write these terms and descriptions. Now let's review. So number 1 would represent identity, And again, gender identity is how someone identifies in their head and thinks about themselves. It's the chemistry that composes you and how you interpret what that means. Number 2 is gender expression. So gender expression is how you or an individual might demonstrate their gender based on traditional gender roles through the ways you act, dress, behave, or interact. Number 3 would be sex. Biological sex refers to the objectively measured organs, hormones, and chromosomes. So for example, females have a vagina and ovaries, XX chromosomes, whereas males will have a penis, testes, XY chromosomes. And an intersex can have any type of combination of the two. And lastly, number 4 represents sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is who you are physically, spiritually, and emotionally attracted to based on their sex or gender in relation to your own. So again, heterosexual would be a quote-unquote straight individual who is sexually attracted to someone of the opposite sex of their own. So let's talk about gender identity and the implications of gender identity in sport. One of the major factors that comes up regarding gender identity revolves around transgender athletes. Trans athletes who wish to participate in their gender-identified sport may have some specific hurdles to cross over first. This is because in competitive sports, it has been claimed that trans athletes who may or may not be going through hormone therapy to transition physically to their identified gender may be at an advantage in sport. Usually this is the case for trans women, also known as male to female trans individuals, who may have high levels of testosterone if they have not started or completed hormone therapy. This concern, along with others including potentially larger muscle mass, more bone density in males to females, have been argued to possibly give a competitive edge. Take note that this is not really a concern for trans men or female to male individuals, as policies usually state that trans men can participate in male sports with no regulations. Some also might see this as a sexist policy. For transgender athletes, most organizations will follow suit to the policies set in place by the IOC, or the International Olympic Committee. In the past, the policies were very strict and severely limited trans athletes' participation in sport. These policies included requiring hormone therapy and sex reassignment surgery in order for trans individuals to participate in their identified gender sport. But it's important to understand that many transgender individuals may not necessarily want to go through sexual reassignment surgery or any hormone therapy. It is completely up to them. Therefore, new policies were recently implemented that only require trans women, so again, male to female transgender individuals, to complete 1 year of hormone therapy and show that their testosterone is under a certain level. There are now no restrictions for trans men to compete in male sports. On the other end of the spectrum, sexuality in sport has been an issue for decades, as homophobia has been fraught throughout sports history. This is, however, improving with positive strides in both societal acceptance of gay, lesbian, and bisexual athletes, and in particular, big-name athletes who pushed hard to gain acceptance, even if that meant possible negative consequences for themselves. So with that, I want you to pause the video and answer the following questions to yourself. Why might gay athletes not come out? What might be the negative ramifications for coming out as a gay or lesbian athlete. Pause the video to ponder this. Hopefully you were able to recognize or identify a few reasons why gay athletes might not come out, including fear of rejection by their coach or teammates, fear of discomfort in the locker room by teammates, fear of losing your position or scholarship, etc. All of those are potential ramifications as well. The outcome for gay athletes coming out usually depends on the support and acceptance of important individuals in their life. Again, examples of out gay or lesbian athletes in society, among many others, includes Jason Collins in the NBA, Michael Sam, formerly in the NFL, Brittany Griner, an athlete in the WNBA and was a collegiate basketball player when she came out, and most notably Billie Jean King, who competed in USA Tennis and Olympics decades ago and is a lead role in identifying and supporting gay and lesbian athletes. Next, please move on to the next video and continue to work on your worksheet as appropriate.